Let's look at Mark 1:1.
I was so proud.
And that was on the homework, was just try to give us a little translation of Mark 1:1 without looking at a translation of Mark 1:1. I'd just like to hear how you did.
What page is that? 93. I'm going to say that in Greek.
So it would be kata markon.
Okay. 93.
Flip them in to kata markon.
Okay.
All right. Do you have it? Mark 1. Did you do Mark 1?
I did.
What page is it on?
93.
93. Okay, so if you want to flip to 93. There should be a very familiar word right at the top of this, right? Yeah, right. There are some who hypothesize, this is a little aside for those who are interested in kind of how the Gospels work. I don't know if you know this, but Matthew and Mark share a lot of the same material. And since Mark was probably the earliest Gospel written, and if you line Matthew and Mark up side by side, people will say often enough that Matthew structured his Gospel on the backbone of Mark. So Mark is the structural foundation for Matthew, if you will, and then Matthew adds in a lot of these collected sayings, and things like that.
So why did Mark get put first?
Why did Mark get? Well, it's not a chronological. If you wanted to put the first book first, you'd probably put down 1 Thessalonians or Galatians, something like that. So Paul was writing before anybody. Or James, could have been an early one.
You're so smart.
No, it's just, I'm teaching you, now you're smart, all right? So, that's how, you know the same thing now, so now you're smart. So, Matthew and Mark, if you line them side by side, they share a lot of the same things, like a lot of the same wording. If like you go through and you underline them in Greek, you say, oh, it's like they're working from the same copy. And they are. They really are. They're using a lot. There were a lot of gospel documents floating around at that time. Luke talks about that in Luke 1. He says, inasmuch as many people have written gospels, I'm going to write one too, in my own way, basically. So it's not like we're saying anything horrible here. We're just kind of saying what Luke already discloses to us in Luke 1:1. So anyway, the gospels, in other words, interpret one another in sort of a way. I know that's kind of like a novel thought. Let's see, Panky and Cheryl, you were there on Tuesday night, and you heard kind of how Chronicles interprets Kings and Samuel and those things. Like it's right there in front of us. Now we're going to rewrite it and interpret it. So there are those who say that John is kind of giving his interpretation of his experiences with Jesus, but is using Mark as well in an unusual sort of way. And it's right off the top. Is one of the reasons why people think it is, because a lot of the wording is very uniquely similar. So, yeah, how does it start?
Beginning.
Yeah, beginning. Now, what's that? Tu evangelium? Of the gospel. Now, Patty, why is it of the?
Because of two, it's the possessive, the genitive thing.
Yeah.
Of the.
So you.
And singular.
Yes, that's right. It's of the. Tu is of the. So tu evangelium. So what about that? Jesu Christu.
Jesus Christ.
Of Jesus Christ. Yeah. It's interesting how when you read it, we're going to look at this a little bit today. It has a nice little flow to it, doesn't it? Okay. Tu evangelium Jesu Christu huiu Theu.
Son.
Son of God.
Huiu Theu. Yeah, Son of God. You hear how all the endings sound the same? That's a neat feature of Greek, is that it was so readable when they heard it. Like when we hear the Bible read, it sometimes loses its art in translation. And when you get in the original, you can hear the art of the Bible as well. So it's got the feel. It was written the way it was for a reason with the sounds that it has. Yeah.
something that kind of came to mind is like if you try to translate a Japanese haiku,
Uh-huh.
some of like the syllables and stuff like that get all messed up in the English, and it loses its artistic feel. Is that kind of the same thing?
Very good analogy. It doesn't sound the same. You get the same pictures, the same images in your mind almost, but not the same feeling. Like it could be some sort of desolate, lonely feeling in Japanese, and in English it's like, huh, tree, you know, whatever. You know, it's like, yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah. So, very good. So that was the verse, right? Arche tu Evangelio Jesu Christu Iuthe. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Which is an interesting start. Anyhow, so that's good. Very good. I'm impressed. You worked through that. And you did good. You did a good job. All right, so any other questions from the week? Now, if your question is, I didn't study, that's not a question, all right? And some questions that are like, I didn't study, so I have a question about something I should have studied, that's also not a question, all right? But do you have a question about something you studied? Yes, Patty.
Page 30, number 7.
Page 30, number 7.
Back to where I started.
All right. So what's the question here?
I want to understand why it's his apostles instead of to these apostles.
Ah, yes. We're going to drill some of these things today. And in fact, we're going to cover this chapter today a little bit. I want to like back up and more or less go over a lot of things from the week just to kind of solidify them. But you see, well, let's just go blow by blow here. Lego, tutus. Now, if you weren't able to gather from the reading, tutus is these, and we'll drill that. I am saying these, the words. I'm saying these words, tus legus, to Jesu, of Jesus. Now here's where it's the question lies. Tois apostolos altoi. Now tois is the. It's that's the dative. That's the to the. Apostolos. Now if it was hutu, actually tutu. It's a weird sounding word, though. Tutu.
Okay.
Tutu. That would be these. Now altu, altos, alto, altu, alton.
Okay. Singular.
Those are the he forms, or of him, or to him, he, him.
Okay.
So we're going to drill that today. That's a good question.
Okay.
That means you're paying attention to what's actually there. So that's good.
I got lost in all the those, this, that, his, that. I was trying to figure out which one was his. Okay.
Yeah. So altu is of him.
Okay.
And so, you know, when you see of him, you can translate it of him. In fact, when I'm translating on the fly, guess what comes out? I always translate it, you know, the thing of him, the son of him. And then if I have to speak it to somebody, then I'll go back and clean it up and say his son or whatever, you know, just so it makes sense. Of him is fine as well. That's kind of like how you did it. It means the same thing. Any other questions? Do you have any like general study questions too? Like if you have any questions on how to kind of go about it, it's good to like collect methods from people and things like that. You can really help yourself by thinking about how you go about studying. It took me a long time to figure out how to study. That's Christian.
So that sort of helped me with the vocab words is kind of like trying to see like what each, I mean this kind of sounds silly, but that each word sounds like something in English. It helps to be able to draw those parallels to which words sound like something in English, and that helps you file them away.
Yeah. So you develop these on your own?
Yeah.
And do you think maybe developing your own helps you too? Because you've actually had to think through it?
We were just learning about that in psychology, how that's the easiest way to learn something is to put it in your own words and file it like that. And also we also learned that if you study it in the same context as you'll be tested on it, that helps a whole bunch. actually, instead of sitting in like an easy chair or something studying, if you're actually going to be taking a test at a desk.
Yeah,
If you study
okay.
at a desk, it actually helps you.
So if I see you up here studying at a round table, then, no, I've heard that before though, like if you wear the same clothes even, you're gonna wear it to a test.
There's a whole
That can
bunch
help
of
you
stuff.
remember. And like, they say like, if it's a short
That's why I
quiz,
do so well.
eat some sweets before you go in, like it kinda gets you. Yeah, there's a lot of little things. Now, when I'm mightily impressed with our high schoolers, because when I was in high school, I did not even have an inkling of how to study. Not even an inkling. So you guys are very mature, and you're doing good. I was probably doing very well, you know, if I want to be grammatically doing well. I'm from West Virginia, so sometimes I'll say things like, you're doing good. It's really, you're doing well, but you know, it's a homey feel to me, okay? So, yeah, it wasn't until after college, really, that I was as mature as you all are, so good for you. Any other questions?
Question.
Yeah.
On page 24, on 6.5,
Uh-huh.
those endings, where it says by, with, to, for.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know when it's going to be by or with or to or for?
Okay, that's a good question. So you see sometimes like these brackets that have like all these options, right? So it's like, which option do I pick? Now, when you see it in a sentence, those options will narrow themselves just because it's like I use the word lap. I think the first week, like what does lap mean? What does lap mean?
The bunch of things.
Whole bunch of things, lots of different.
Okay, how do you know what it means?
Context.
Depending on what you're talking about. Like say I ran, you think it's a lap around the track,
Uh-huh.
right? Or I'm sitting, or she sat on my lap, then you know it's your lap. So it all depends on what else is in the sentence.
Mm-hmm. So you just kind of have to read the sentence with it in. Now, if you
Okay.
just see it hovering out there by itself, to lago, it doesn't really mean much of anything. To the word, by the word, in the word. I mean, it can mean one of those things. Now, if you see it in a sentence, then you'll be able to kind of put the mark on it, what it is.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing. Sometimes there's some vagueness in these. Now, this is where Greek is an interesting and beautiful thing, and why translations are different is because sometimes it's vague as to what kind of a to lago are we talking. You know, what does it specifically mean here? And so translators will make different choices. Over here, you might have the NIV. They discuss this for like 15 hours on their committee, and they say, let's translate it this way. You know, after like all these arguments, they're arguing back and forth. You know, well, actually, I think, you know. So they finally get it to the point. And then over here, the New American Standard Version has different translators, and maybe they share a couple, you know, between the two of them. The committees share translators. And they might argue on and come to a different conclusion in that committee as to, like, was it a by or a to that we should put in front of this? And sometimes it might be that there's a little bit of a shade of both going on, you know? So, Christian.
Why is it that there's so many differences, like they were talking in the book about like, well, what does this mean in my language?
Mm-hmm.
If there can be so much variation, why is it that so many things are so close? Do you kind of understand my question?
Yeah, why don't you kind of like expand on it just a little bit?
So like with word order,
Uh-huh.
it can mean something completely different. Like you can read it in Greek and it's almost nothing like what it would sound like in English.
Uh-huh.
And so if I sat there and said, okay, well this is what it means in English, and then you sat there, they could be so completely different. But now why is it that most of the Bible versions are pretty congruent in that? Like there's just only a couple word variation instead of like entire structure.
No, that's an interesting, that's a good question. Why are, you know, everybody goes on and on about how different translations are, and you're saying it's remarkable that they're as similar as they are.
Considering what they're based on.
Okay, yeah, I've never actually heard anybody ask that question. That's, that is kind of astounding, isn't it? That they're as similar as they are, considering how many other options are available out there. Yeah. I think where you see the biggest difference is what translation philosophy they have chosen to use. So let me just kind of like explain this a little bit. Like in the New American Standard Version or the ESV, the English Standard Version, they sit down and they say, let's try to stick to the word order as much as possible, although that's not possible at all, as you know now. But let's try to keep it like, you know, roughly similar in that way. And so they'll do that. They'll try to stay as close as they can. So that, you know, maybe they're 50% close. Now the New Living Translation over here will say, let's not worry so much about how the words are structured in that like microscopic setting. Let's worry more about how they fit together more broadly. Like, so this clause should be in front of this clause. Unless it doesn't make any sense in English, then we'll even flip whole clauses around, like whole phrases around, to bring that whole sentence into English a little more fluidly. So that's where like the New Living Translation has a different philosophy. They say we want the larger context to be, not necessarily paraphrasing, but feeling more free to, like, just like the New American Standard, for instance, the NASB, feels comfortable moving words around to make it make sense in English. The New Living Translation will say, we can move clauses around to make it make sense in English, as long as they're part of the same sentence and paragraph, you know. But to like put all your datives together, you know, put all your, like there's a genitive down here that goes up here. Let's bring all those together. And sometimes I think that's why the New Living Translation is so popular and seems to make so much sense when you read it, is because they've tried to like do a total translation into English, whereas the other ones have a different philosophy, so they will seem a lot more alike. And the NIV is somewhere kind of like in between. They'll say, here we need more of that philosophy. Here we can use that philosophy. So the NIV has given itself more flexibility in that way. So sometimes you'll feel like you're reading the New American, sometimes you feel like you're reading the NLT, the New Living Translation. So, does that answer the question a little bit?
Yeah. Now, when they were reading it in Greek, did it sound like as much sense as the New Living Translation makes to us? Did it make that much sense to them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
It was that clear. It wasn't like you needed to be a scholar to figure out exactly what it was saying. It was just black and white.
Yeah, I mean, the concepts are hard, but the language itself is just beautifully clear. Which is one of the reasons why I think, you know, if you aren't doing the work, like you all are going to be less dependent on paraphrases. But I think if you don't have the background, which you're getting, then it's useful to have someone who has worked through it, who knows Greek, who's paraphrased it, to kind of give, you don't rely on that. You say, this is kind of more how it would sound. Now I'll go over here and read my like New American, my more like structured. And if you kind of like can fuse those together in your brain, I think that's kind of hard to do though. Someone's like, oh, why don't I just learn Greek, Jesus? You know? No, but yeah, that's it would have flowed, would have been nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for
Good.
that question.
No, that's good. I think everybody's a little curious about these things. All right, so the chapter from this week, chapter 7, was all about hutas and autas. And so that's like the difference between this and he is like pretty similar sounding when you're up at the top of this chart. You have hutas, means this, right? We learned this in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Hutas, ein in arche prostanteon, or something like that. This one was in the beginning with God. Hutas, this. How does it go? John 1:1? He was in the beginning with God? Yeah, I wonder why John didn't pick autos then. He picks hutas. This one was in the beginning with God. This was in the beginning with God. Why? Anyway, you wouldn't really think about that if you weren't looking at Greek, probably. So, given the choice between hutas and autos, John picks hutas. So anyway, this is the difference here, but you see the endings are all the same as your noun endings. You don't have to learn your endings again. These endings get jammed on everything. I mean, seriously. If you learn those endings, they get jammed on everything. You're just learning new vocab, put the endings on. That's kind of interesting. So here you have hutas, tutu, tuto, tuton, hutoi, tuton, tutois, tutus. Do those endings look familiar? Os, u, o, on, oi, on, ois, us. Same over here. Os, u, o, on, oi, on, ois, us. That's why you learn the endings. You've really mastered a huge part of the language. You say, well, we're only on like we learned these on week 3. How could you talk about mastering the language? You learned some really important stuff in week 3. It's like if you learn week 1 through 4, if you learn this stuff, then you've gone a really long ways down the road of learning Greek. If you like master these endings, you've really come a long way in learning Greek.
I experienced that on Sunday. We were going over, I think it was 1 Peter, and I knew from the endings and what you taught us almost every single word. And I was sitting there reading through it, and I was like, I understand. But it was really neat seeing the city names in Greek, because we have the English equivalents of them, so sometimes it sounds a little weird. You know exactly how it's supposed to sound.
Yes.
In the Greek.
Yeah, you can pronounce them now from the Greek.
Yeah.
You could like annoy everybody, right? You know what that actually is?
What do you know? In the Greek.
That's not why you do this. That is not why you do this. So anyway, let's just open our books, if you have yours. Now you can look over somebody else's shoulder to page 27. I just want to like talk about these things from our book a little bit. We're going to use our book someday. So chapter 7 was called Autos, he, and Gutos, this. Don't you love the chapter names in this book? It's like, I wonder what I'm going to learn. Oh, there it is. You know, Autos is he, Gutos is this. So there on the top it says Autos, he, has forms similar to logos. We just talked about that. So Autos is he or it. It can mean a masculine, it. So a male gorilla, or a man. Hopefully you know the difference. Autos and Autoi is they. It's plural, he or it. Did you know that more than one it is a they? Even in
ITS is they.
yeah, more than there's the its. No, those aren't its. Those are those are theys. That's kind of weird, isn't it? Why in English do you not put s on it to make it more than one it?
Because it already means something else.
It's already named something else. Yeah, you can't. Its is already something that's taken. Wow, Christian, what are you doing to me?
I don't even know.
This is an interesting.
Like that guy who discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was an accident, I swear.
So yeah, there's another one where English is weird. If you put s on an it, it's not more than one it. You got to go those or they. Okay, never mind. So, autos pistue. Now here's a word you don't know yet. That's one of the reasons we're turning to this book. Pistuo means I believe. Pistis is faith. Pistuo is I have faith or I believe. Would you say that's probably an important word in the New Testament? Yes. Is Christianity a religion of believing certain things, or is that not really important? So you think the word probably doesn't show up much? Yeah, okay. It's an important word. Pistuo means I believe. Pistues would mean, we're going verb endings now.
You believe.
You believe, yeah. So we're just going to go down the chart. Pistuo, pistues, pistue. Now this is nouns. Don't look at this. Yes, he, she, it. Pistue. Pistuamen. We believe. Pistuete.
Y'all.
And pistuisen. Pistuisen. Okay. Good. So you get it. So autos, once you learn the vocab, you can like go, what is the ending? If you can look up the vocab and then think through your endings, you'll be fine. So pistuo, I believe. Pistuo, pistues, pistue. Okay, he believes. All right. So autos pistue. Here's another word that's pretty important. But every language has a but, because whenever somebody's done saying something, you gotta go, yeah, that's true, but. And that's done in every language. Every language has several words that say, yeah, I know that's true, but. And so here's no different. Ala means but.
How do you pronounce that?
Allah.
So the-
Allah. Allah.
Oh,
What's that? Are you? What's all the buzz? Is it because the Prophet Allah?
Yeah.
No. They said that
No, we were mispronouncing.
Oh, okay.
saying anga.
We were looking at his two gammas. Totally mispronounced it all week.
Oh, okay. That's, yeah.
It's no big deal.
Well, I'm glad you figured it out. though.
Well,
So-
why does it not follow the anga?
Because
Because
it's lambda.
it's lambda.
I was right there.
Good. Okay. Good.
Okay,
So those are lambdas, not gammas.
Oh my God.
You know, we all have things like that, where you're like looking at something and you think it's something else all week, and it's just not.
None of you heard that.
Have you ever called your kid a different name? Donna, have you ever called your kids the wrong names?
Oh my gosh, yeah, my
Yeah.
mom grew up calling me, I grew up with my mother calling me Satin.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the dog's name.
Spaniel.
The dog's name. So, I mean, it's just the same thing. It can happen with any part of your life.
Christian,
Right?
Danny, Julie, who are
It's
you?
like me trying to cook without a recipe. Was that 2 teaspoons of baking soda or was that 2 cups, you know? All right.
Glad I don't eat that.
Of bacon soda.
Bacon.
All right, let's go back to our sentence. Let's focus, people, all right? Altas pistue, he believes Allah, but altoi, what's altoi? Now, if you don't know, you can look right here and say that's a plural, that's a they, or you can just look on the next one. They, more than one he, is it he's? No, more than one he is a they. It should be he's, but it's not he's. It's they. All right? So, altoi is they. Ooh, you're learning a few new words here. We're just kind of like gently going through them. Ooh means not. So if somebody says something you don't like.
Ew.
Ooh, yeah, ooh, ooh, ooh. All right, so if somebody tries to greet you on Sunday and you're having a bad day and they say, Kyrie, and you say, ooh, you just, or you can say, ooh, Kyrie, you know? All right, so don't do that. But I'm just telling you that
Not every day.
that's possible, all right? So, altas pistue, he believes, Allah, but altoi u pistuusin. They do not believe. They are not believing. Pistuusin, pisto, pistuo, pistues, pistue, pistuumin, pistuete, pistuusin. That was week 2. So, they do not believe. Now, here's why it's interesting here, is that you notice that you don't need altas in this sentence. Why? Why don't you need altas in this sentence? Why?
It doesn't, because you have nouns, you should have the opposite already.
Okay.
Because your noun ending tells you it's they.
Yeah, you already know that it's a they, right? You already know that it's a he or maybe a she,
Oh, I thought you said
right? So, pistue means,
why they
it can mean he believes, right? So when you put altos in front of it, it's like almost like saying he believes, right? And when you have altoi, it means they. You already know that pistuusin means they believe, right? I believe, you believe, he believes, or she believes, or it believes. We believe, y'all believe, they believe. So why put altoi on there, they, when pistuusin already means they are doing this verb, they believe. Emphasis would be one, yes. And you see something in the New Testament is that sometimes these words, these they, did you just read it off of there? Is that, yeah, emphasis, good. That's one of the ways it gets used. Like they believe. It's very emphatic. It's almost like they. I don't want to take it too strong. Like they really believe, but it's pointing them out in a very focused way. They, you know, he. So sometimes these words right here are used for emphasis. So when hutas, ein and arche proston theon, when this was in the beginning with God, there's a very intentional focus going on this logos. There's something going on there. He's trying to emphasize the importance of the word in that pre-incarnate Trinity. Yeah.
I'm just thinking that English, French, Spanish, most languages always include the subject.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why we're so concerned that we have this subject. Why do we put the he? I think it's just a fact of language, isn't it? Or is it really for emphasis?
It's really for emphasis because often
Only in
enough,
Greek. So in other languages, it's not for emphasis.
so like when we say you have to include a pronoun like a he or a she in English, like you don't say went to the store.
But it still implies.
But it's not embedded, right?
Yeah.
Went to the store. Let's just do an example.
Okay.
In English. Went to the store.
That's past tense though, but if you say go to the store.
Well, that's imperative. So let's say goes to the store, all right?
Right, and
Is
then you
going
know
to the
it's a he, she, or it, or what's the
No,
you?
you understood
Or
as a you.
I am.
Yeah.
I am. So
Okay.
that's why I use went, because you can use it with anything. So let's say, well, let's say going. Goes. No, let's stick with went, because it's more,
Universal.
went to the store. Who went to the store?
We have plural.
You don't know. That's right. I went to the store. He went to the store. You went to the store. They went to the store. So we have to include, in that case, a pronoun. He, she, I. In Greek, you see that it's already embedded in your verb. Pistuo. Why do I need a pronoun? You don't. So, Pat, when you read Greek, when you're looking through these sentences, you'll find that most of the time there is no pronoun.
Okay.
It's
that's-
embedded in the
that's-
verb.
That's important to know, okay. Okay.
It's embedded in the verb. So, pistuo means I believe. You don't need to add another I to it, which would be ego. Ego, pistuo. Yeah, it's like ego. Yeah, it's like ego. That's where ego comes from. It's the I, you know? So, ego pistuo. You don't need to say that. You'll never see that. Unless it's like really emphasized. I believe. You know? Like, I myself believe. Ego pistuo. You know? That's really. That's most of the time it'll be like pistuo. I believe. Christian.
Would that kind of be like if Joshua had said, like, when he was like talking about, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, like that kind of like,
Yes.
is that when you would use it?
Yeah, something like as for me, myself, and these people over here, yeah, kind of like a, that's why when Jesus is picking up on like Exodus language, I am who I am, when you read through the Greek in the Gospels, you'll see these like things come up where he says, eimi means I am, eimi is the Greek verb for I am, eimi. You can just say eimi, and you're fine. Eimi means I am. You don't need to add ego to it. But sometimes Jesus scores these points in the language by saying, ego eimi, and they look at him and go, I myself am. He's drawing attention to something significant there. Ego eimi, I myself am. Am what? You read Exodus, you know? Yeah, that's why they got mad. When he says, when they pick up stones to kill him, he says, before Abraham was, ego eimi, you know? He could have just said eimi, or he should have said aim, right? I was. Aim. But he said, he's like some things come out when you're reading it in the language, like, whoa, okay, there's some emphasis here. Ego eimi, he doesn't need to say ego. he just really kicked something up here. So, yeah, you don't necessarily need the pronouns. These things are, when you see them, pay attention to them because they're put there for a reason usually, of some sort. They're fulfilling an extra function. So, he himself believes, but they themselves do not believe, if you want to use our example in that sort of emphatic way. I wouldn't recommend translating it that way all the time, but just kind of like, in your mind, have sort of a shade of emphasis, like a little bit of highlighting, if you will. You can't translate highlighting. One of these days, maybe there will be a Bible that uses highlighting to, like, bring out grammatical emphasis, or things like that. But you almost have to have like this kind of training to know how to use it, right? So that's why it's difficult to say that there will be a day. So anyway, we can dream, can't we? So note that pistue by itself means he believes. Altos is added for emphasis, usually when he is contrasted with another group or a person or group. So let's just look at a couple of examples. Altoi legusin, they are speaking, Allah, but altos u lege, he not speaking. He is not speaking. Okay, does that make sense? He's making sense now? A little bit? Okay, good. So let's do one more here. Altoi graphusin, they, what?
They are writing.
They're writing, graphusin. Good. Tus lagus.
They are writing words.
The words, yes. Allah, altos, u graphe, altus. Hatheos, Hyanthropos is the man. Apostolos is the apostle. Athronos is a throne. A throne. Excuse me. Now here's a good one to learn. Ha Uranos, the heaven. The heavens. The heavens. Heaven. Uranos. Usually referring to the sky. Uranos. Or like kingdom of heaven. Matthew uses that.
I thought the planet was named after a Greek god.
It is.
Was he the god of the god? I thought that was Jupiter.
I was just looking at a class assistant wrote an article called "Did the Greeks Believe in Their Gods?" Asking the question, were the names of these gods just like titles and pictures in their minds that they slapped over these different natural phenomena? Like, did they really believe there was like this huge, gigantic guy up there? Like,
they believed in the
God.
pantheon, but I think it was Aristotle and Plato argued about it, along with who was their teacher?
Well, Socrates is the guy that had to drink the hemlock. Because
Yeah. We were just learning about this in Rome.
So the like you'll see this sometimes, like in Revelation, you have Thanatos is sitting on a horse. Who's Thanatos? Death. And then you have Hades sitting on a horse. Who's Hades? They're sitting on the same horse.
The god of the underworld.
God of the underworld, or hell, or
Well, their hell wasn't eternal damnation necessarily. The underworld was composed of if you were good, medium, bad, or if you were brought back to life and achieved heaven 3 times, you got into super heaven or something like that.
But my question is, who is it sitting on the horse in John's picture in Revelation? He's using the Greek god name, Hades.
Well, he was the god of the underworld.
So which one does John mean when he sees Thanatos and Hades sitting on
Death
the
and
horse?
Hades were two different entities. One was in charge of death itself, because according to ancient mythology, Hades wasn't in charge of the actual death. He was just in charge. He was kind of like a prison. He was kind of like the ward. He kept people from going in and out. He didn't necessarily bring them to death itself.
But in the actual writings themselves, you see that Hades is talked about as kind of either a place or a phenomenon that happens, or it's really vague. Same with Uranus, Uranus. It's like Uranus. It's like, what is this? Is it a place? Is this like a natural thing? Is this the god, Uranus?
It was in Greek, because I think the planets were named after the Roman equivalents.
Well,
The Greeks came first, didn't they?
Yeah, the Greeks came first, but the Romans took the Greek names and changed them.
yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on those transferences between like Zeus and Jupiter.
I
And,
saw them, they
those
didn't
things,
change.
yeah.
I was just reading about that.
Zeus is Greek, Jupiter is Roman.
But anyway, the question was, is this a god? Or is this a thing, a place, or whatever? And the answer is yes. You got to work it out. So that's the question. That's the same with like Hades and Thanatos sitting on a horse. Like, what are you talking about here? Like, are you talking about the Greek god? Is this like some kind of picture of like something that Jesus is going to put the smackdown on him in the end? Or like what? No, it's like you got to think this stuff through, and we don't, because we don't live in that world. Like, my translation says hell, you know? It says death and hell, you know? You read it in Greek, all of a sudden I'm going through this process of discovery, which you can too now. Like, huh, wait a minute. I'm so used to seeing my English equivalent, I never thought this is the same thing as the Greek equivalent over there. Maybe, you know, can I even ask this question? You know, am I allowed to? Yeah, Christian.
Is it kind of like, I've always like pictured it as like an image, like he was using symbols that they understood in that culture to describe like an imagery of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you were to say, I'm trying to figure out like an American equivalent of it, but like if you were to maybe like symbolize freedom as the Statue of Liberty or something like that.
Yeah, there's something like that going on.
You know, like,
Uncle
you know what I'm
Sam.
saying? Yeah, like the imagery, and he used something that they understood.
Mm-hmm.
Death and Hades, they were very familiar with that because that was their cultural,
Mm-hmm.
you know, gods and figureheads and stuff like that.
You're on the right track with it, yes.
Okay.
Very good. Now, if you flip over the page to page 30, boy, we get off on a rabbit trail with just a vocab word. That's fine. That's one of the reasons you come here, I hope, is to think through some of these cultural things as well. Why not, right? If you want to get up and get cookies or get coffee or whatever, that's fine. I'm just going to keep talking. So I have to leave like right at the time today. So on page 30, you have hutas, which we already talked about a little bit. This man, this person. It can also mean he, right? So we saw that we have to look at the context. Sometimes there's some ambiguity. It can mean the thing or the person. And Dobson likes to mix this up for you immediately. He likes to like make sure that you're getting all the different kinds of ways it can be used, because he doesn't want you to like be reading Greek in the wild and not have some sort of familiarity with, oh, I thought this meant this only. Why is, you know, why does it mean he here? Well, Dobson likes to show you all the little ways it can be used immediately. Doesn't like to hide it. So again, the forms of hutas have the endings, the same endings, and I think we're pretty good on that. So, any further questions on this and he? We've really been on this slide for like time, which is fun. Okay. So let's use our textbooks. And do you want to do this? Man, this fits so well with like taking a little break. If you don't want to do this, just rise up against me and mute me. Turn to page 9 and practice the section 3.4 with someone from another table that you don't know very well.
I don't know you.
No? Is that working?
Not today. No, mutiny.
Mutiny?
We have a quiz, don't we?
We have a lot more. We have a quiz, we got a lot more to go here.
What if I decide not to give you a quiz today?
Oh, well.
Oh, that'll be fun.
I knew it was
Okay, so we're not allowed to do
quiz.
mutiny?
Hmm?
So we're not allowed to mutiny.
Well,
I'll do
Just
it.
say
But
Mr.
that's
Proctor,
your
you're my
excuse.
buddy.
that's the excuse. I want you to work with people at a table on page 9, section 3.4, and just look at, translate these together a little bit. This is
Let's do it.
this is pretty simple.
Mr. Proctor, you're my buddy.
The words are true.
Study buddy? Do we have to use different tables?
Yeah, you can go to a different table. That's fine. Doesn't matter.
Down.
We'll stop right there.
When I was trying to go to
For number 1 on page 25, what did you get?
What's that?
For number 5 on number 1 on page 25, which one did you get with your group? Did you say, well, somebody read the Greek to us?
Reducen tus legusoi apostoloi. Apostoloi.
What was that? Did you want to talk?
Legusen tus legus oi apostoloi.
Good. Very good. Okay. Excellent. So what did you get for question 1? Beth, did you all work on this one? Oh, back there I saw a hand. I'll pick on somebody who raises their hand. Yes.
B, the apostles speak the words.
The apostles speak the words. Good. That's what I got. I haven't flipped to the back of the book. Let's check it. Did anybody do that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it B?
Yeah.
Okay. So why is it that apostles, the apostles is at the end of the Greek phrase, boy, apostle boy, but it's at the beginning of the English phrase? Why?
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
This will be our new mantra.
It doesn't matter.
This will
Don't
be our new
worry
mantra.
about it.
Don't
It's
worry
just
about
there.
it.
There it is.
Don't worry.
It's the subject,
Just the
and
way
we
it
put
is.
the subjects first, and they don't. It's okay. But it's fine, right? Are you coming through the process of the many stages of I don't want to accept this to I'm angry with this to okay, I just
So much easier. Just go with the flow.
I'll just go.
Don't fight the tide.
Very
Just get
good.
in.
Very good. So number 2. Did everybody get to number 2? That's where we left off. What did you get for number 2? Well, somebody read it first. Patty so willingly volunteered to read the first one. Would somebody read the second one? Noah, go ahead.
To biblion anaginoviske o prophetes.
Good, just a whole prophetes. Very good. You're zipping along there, Noah. Good. What did you get for that?
B.
B? Did anybody get anything different? I know that when you hear me say things like that, you go, of course it's B, we looked it up. You're just trying to entrap us. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to talk about it. So,
Just making sure we know what we know.
exactly right. So we have again, the subject is at the end, right? Ho prophetes. Now this one, you know what I told you Dobson does? He'll throw stuff in there that you're not exactly ready for, along with stuff that you already know. Like there, every once in a while, you'll see something. You'll see like I know everything in this sentence, but I don't know what that TO is, right? Like I'm expecting a ton. Like you haven't had TO.
I was going to say, I don't recognize that, but I probably forgot it.
No, you didn't forget.
Yes.
You're right. That's the way this book works. If you go back to your charts and look it up and it's not there, he's
Yeah.
trying to sneak stuff in there.
Yeah. He always
Trixie.
introduces something
Yes.
before we get to it.
You're picking up on his method a little bit. He slips stuff under the rug, and then he'll explain it later, maybe a chapter or two down the road.
Yep. I noticed that.
As opposed to Nicola and Panky, our book, everything up front, you'll never run into a word that you haven't talked about yet. So it's just different approaches.
I like this approach.
Yeah.
FYI.
I think it's, I'm really enjoying giving it a whirl here. So, and then prophetes, it's got like kind of a different ending. You'd expect prophetos, right? Wouldn't you expect prophetos? He threw in a pink fish from the pink bowl. So, kind of. So, but it's okay because you figured it out. You figured it out even though you didn't know you didn't even probably notice the ace. You're like, okay, there's a hole there in front of it. Definite article, that's the subject, good, right? Now, as I was sitting with my table, we were talking a little bit about how do you do exercises like this. Just real practical pointers for you. Here's what I do, and I think this will work for most of you, is just figure it out one word at a time, jot it down. Because if you're like me, you figure out a word, and you're like, okay, I'll bookmark that in my head. By the time you get 2 words down the road, you forgot what the first one was. And you're like, I can't learn Greek. You know. So just when you figure out the first word, write it down. The biblion, the book. Okay, I got the book on paper. Anaginoske. Okay, that's something about reading. I read. Okay, I'm just going to write read for now. Write down read. Okay, who's doing the reading? I'll go look this up, you know. Okay, he is reading. Okay, so then you have these. The book he is reading. The prophet. You figured that one out. So now you have all these words down. They don't make any sense yet because they're out of order. So you say the book he is reading, the prophet. You go, which one is the subject? You figure out it's the prophet. I'm going to move it in front of the verb. Maybe draw an arrow. Maybe rewrite the whole thing. However you want to do that. I sometimes will just draw an arrow. Or, yeah, you can cut and paste if you're doing it in a computer document or something like that. Or if you have scissors. You know, you don't have to have
Scissors
scissors
and
to cut and
numbers.
paste. So that's just a real practical pointer. Don't be afraid to like write down as you go some rough drafts of all these things you're working through. Rough drafts are great. And if you can remember what part of speech it is, jot that down next to it. Just whatever you can think about a word, whatever you can figure out about a word. Jot it down. Okay, did anybody get as far as 3? Yes. What did you get for 3? Well, somebody read it. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. Somebody read 3. Is that a hand, Christian? Okay. I'm not an evangelist. I'm not really aggressive with it. Okay. I thought that was a hand, but I wasn't sure. Go ahead.
Okay, is it graphe?
That sounds weird, but don't be afraid to say it. Yes.
Tutus, tos, logos, homarcos.
I think you did very good, Christian. I think because it sounds so weird, you're afraid to say it that weird. But it just does sound weird.
I have a hard time remembering all the time what it is when I'm saying it out loud.
Yeah.
I know all the letters, what they sound like in my head. It's just getting them out. It's like,
yeah.
How do you put an O in an oo?
Yeah, right.
Oh.
Oh. Oh. Yeah. It really is. Tutus, tus, logos. Logos. Tutus, tus, let me read. Tutus, tus, logos. It really is like, no, I'm not going to read that out loud. My brain is not accepting it. Very good, though.
Okay.
You're zipping along as you read these. And that's a great thing.
Sometimes it helps to read it faster. That way you don't think about it as much.
So what did you get, A or B?
Mark writes the words.
Okay. Now you see with these sentences that each one could be like this sentence. Each one is technically. You could say technically. It's mine. Literally. Or if you're very dogmatic, clearly. Okay. So explain your position a little bit. Why you chose what you chose, and both of you have a good argument. So why did you choose what you chose?
It asks us to choose the better English translation.
Okay.
So the better English translation, we don't say the words, we say these words. That's why I choose it.
Okay. Would anybody else say that was kind of what I was thinking? Yes, okay. Now when you say the words, you do have a leg to stand on. Why did you say that? Just explain.
Because the tus, is that correct? Tus?
Tutus, tus.
Tus.
Yeah.
I was sort of, playing on those and it made me believe that it was these words.
Mm-hmm. So that's literally there, right? Literally that's there. Whatever that means. I don't even know anymore.
So now's the time when you want to use our grammar properly. Correct? This is exactly right.
Yes. So, I think you probably worked through that to get to you worked through B to get to A. But they're both there. It's just how you translate it in a proper English where people think this guy knows English, Did anybody get as far as 4? 4? Okay, what did you get with 4? Oh, somebody read it. Somebody read it. Somebody read it.
We're skipping every day.
Who will read 4? I'll let people who've gone go again. Because we're just at that patch.
Okay. Tus logos. It would be this one. Yeah. This would strip me up.
Yeah, right.
Anagnomen. Altois.
Yeah, you're zipping along and all of a sudden you confront this gigantic monster.
I know, that's just what Anaganoskin, whatever.
Anaganoskin, yeah.
Anaganoskin, that has always tripped me up from the beginning.
It's kind of syncopated. If you want to think about it that way, Anaganoskin. You
I've
kind
been
of
reading it out loud, so
I can tell.
I'm better than I was.
I can hear when reading aloud has been practiced. You obviously have. So what did you get?
Oh, this is the one we struggled over. That would be big. No, wasn't it that? Yeah, that would be big. The first A is the literal translation.
Yeah, okay. And you had a hand up? B. Now let me just kind of like read it in a word-for-word translation, right? The words of him we are reading to them. Okay, that's what A says, right?
Right.
That's just a word-for-word translation. The words of him we are reading to them. That's like your rough draft that you write out as you're going through and saying, what does this say? B is when you actually go back and say, now I'm going to rearrange this in English. You know, I'm going to rearrange this in English. Okay, we are reading to them his words. In fact, Pat, I went and did a search. You would, in 9 times out of 10, use the dative case. So, good instance. And then that
With the
discussion we had.
with an indirect. Yeah.
His
So-
words to them.
All right, so that I think that if you've got these exercises down, if you're working through them like this, this is just kind of illustrate what you got to do to get through these. Real quick, we're going to do page 29 together. Is there anyone on here that you, if you looked at these during the week, that you wanted to revisit?
Confused the whole week, but now it's making a lot more sense.
Is it
Just hearing it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, I know a lot of the times when I'm reading it, if I say it out loud, I mess it all up.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps to hear it the right way, and it's like, oh, well, that makes sense in light of what we've learned before.
Yeah, that's why it's important to be here and be checked in for these lectures. I think that we can kind of like untie the knots. Today, you notice we didn't really like do a lot of new stuff. I think it's important to have some catch-up stuff. That's one thing I learned last time. Is stop and breathe. You know. Okay. However, I do have one new thing in your handout. We're not going to cover it today, but I just want to read it. You can take this home with you. It's in your handout. That if you take a verb, like Lego, and you add own to it, for singular, or antes for plural, it turns the verb into an ing verb, a participle. Keep out, we're getting participles. We'll get to infinitives eventually. Legon, then, we added that ending, or legontes could be translated the same. And I know that doesn't sound too cool, but I do put some uses in here that you'll see. We'll cover these next time. And then I've given you some vocab words, okay? So, and with some little examples I've written out. Now, some of these examples are written at like 1 in the morning. If you find a typo, you know, let me know. That's good. That means you're reading it. So, some new vocab. Ago, I lead. Akuo, you know that one. Baptizo, you know that one. That's exactly what it looked like when I got baptized. Lepo, I see. I love idealistic Christian arts and like the bookstores and stuff. It's like, I'm like, my life is never like that. You know? Are we trying to sell me something with this? You know, it's a lot more mundane,
That'd be weird.
but it's also a beautiful
That'd be weird
thing.
if life was like that.
Wouldn't it? I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to encapsulate all the wonderfulness into one picture. Anyway, grapho, you know. Tedesco's new. It means to teach. Well, actually, we talked about it a little bit. Didactic, yeah. Teachable. You know, so. Doxazo is good to know. I glorify. You ever heard the doxology? Praise God from whom all blessings flow. If you can remember that, you can remember this word. Doxa is glory. Doxazo is I glorify. Doxadzes is you glorify. Doxadze is he glorifies. Doxazumen, we are glorifying. Okay, you get the picture. Echo, I have. Sometimes I think these will have some little mnemonic devices that might help. So, echo, and echo in here. Okay, so anyway. Therapeuo means I heal. That's what a doctor does. Keruso means I preach. I don't know if this helps. Okay. Patho means I trust. Pistuo, we talked about that today, right? Pistuo, I believe. Remember we said it's important. So, Sozo, I save, you have that. Agros, we talked about agros, right? Well, this is virtual agros.
Is that field?
That looks real.
Yeah, okay. Remember the Farmville phenomenon of a few years ago? So, okay, all right. The vocabulary word is actually embedded in here. So Delphos, you should know. These are brothers.
Where is it?
Oh, Adelphoi.
Oh, yeah, it's brothers, right?
Mm-hmm. I should have given you the word for righteous right there. Hoi dikaioi adelphoi. I'll give it to you some other time. All right, hamartolos. Is it sinner? I mean, we're all sinners. But I mean, Al Capone is a notorious sinner. So I was just looking for something notorious. I'm not making a judgment saying we have. Everyone has fallen short of the glory of God, right? Al Capone did it in the newspaper, so that's why he's here. Angelos, Thanatos, Lithos. I gotta let you go, but what does this say? Anthropos lithos. What do you think that says? Lithos means stone. Write stone next to it. Stone man. Yes, man of stone. Anthropos of lithos, right? Lithos is stone. Lithography, what's another one?
Lithograph.
Lithograph. That's Michelangelo's David. I think he's got,
Slime.
yeah, something. Yeah. I didn't get the whole picture. There's a reason for that. Oikos. Oikos is house. So you go to IKEA to get stuff for your oikos. Unless you're like one of these rich people. Or like me, you go to Karen Share. Because I'm among the elite who shops at Karen Share.
Conjunction.
And Emphatic. All right, so these are some vocab words. These are just things that you're going to need to know eventually, so why not learn them now, okay? Ignore the homework. You've got to change this a little bit, all right? Well, don't ignore it. Let me just fix it. Read pages 34 to 40 and review pages 27 to 33. So stick with that. Instead of the quiz, though, I'm going to give you today's quiz as a take-home quiz, not to be looked at by yourself, but with somebody else, okay? But don't open a book when you take this quiz, all right? Try to, you can do it on your own, but try to pair up with somebody to take this quiz, okay? Yeah.
Yep.
Can you do that? If you can't do it, if you say it's impossible for me to get in touch with somebody who is studying Greek or knows Greek, it's just absolutely impossible, okay, that's fine. But I think that you could probably, maybe even on Sunday, I don't know, So I'm going to give this quiz out, but what I don't want you doing is cheating from the book, all right? Don't cheat from the book. You can study, you can put it off, you can study all week, okay? But don't, take it when you're ready.
Do you want our
Yeah.
homework?
This week's quiz.
Yes, can I have your homework? You have it.
I'll be
Yeah, there won't,
Oh,
yeah.
my name's not on it.
This is the quiz we would
This
have
is the
got.
quiz that you would have
I'm
gotten
ready
today.
for your
Yeah, I'm not going to give you a new quiz next week. Today.
Anybody have homework?
You have your
You weren't
worksheet?
here, you weren't
Yeah.
here. You have yours.
Here you go.
Give me your worksheet next week. Or Sunday. Okay? Oh, thank you.
So John, this quiz you're handing out, is this the one we prepared for today?
This is the one you take. There will not be another quiz next week.
I know, but
Okay?
it's like, we have enough information, so if we stay out after now, we can pass it?
Yes,
Okay.
I think so.
Could we get 100?
I don't know if you'll get 100. I can't guarantee it, but I put a disclaimer at the bottom.
Oh, no.
Need one more. Nicole, you got this by
I
email.
got it, yep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
With little extra things on it.
I did.
But you don't need-
Close my.
I got it, but
So, does anybody need me to clarify that again?
Yes, here, I quiz alert.
Because I did feel the need to get a little flexible for the schedule and do things a little differently today, so I hope that doesn't throw you off. No quiz next week. Take the tape off.